Okay, I'm going to do an installation of Microsoft Windows Server 2012. It became generally available today, September 4th, 2012. And here we have the vSphere client. So what you just saw was Veeam pushing the file to my data store. And in that data store, if I show you the data store browser, what we have is an ISO folder, and it's got what we need. Okay, so we've got the hypervisor version, hypervisor only version, and the full version from MSDN, 3.6 gig. Let's go ahead and get started. Right-click, New Virtual Machine. Typical. Now, I like to give it a name like that. So instead of a host name, I go with all uppercase and the word template. It makes it really stand out because that's my goal, is to make this a template and then deploy copies of that template, which become my VMs that I use and kick the tires on. Okay, let's change it to Windows Server 2012 64-bit. I should point out that I am on ESXi 5.1. I'm just going to hit next, next, next. We can change that network adapter to a better one later on after the initial install. So I need to keep an eye on my data store. I'm on a solid state where I clearly don't have that much space, but I'm thin provisioning to fake it. That way the Windows Server instance itself doesn't need its C drive resize, which is a bit of a hassle. I obviously have to keep an eye on my SSD-based data store to make sure I don't fill it up, which is a bad thing with solid state. You don't want to get past like 90% full. Okay, now why do I need to edit this? Well, because we haven't mounted the DVD ISO. Let's go ahead and do that. Make sure Connect on Power On is checked. I usually do that right away to try to avoid forgetting that. And there you have it. So, 1 CPU, 4 gig of RAM, that should do it to get started. Now during the beta period, sometimes I had to play with the version of Windows. We'd have to lie. We'd also have to play with UEFI BIOS. Now that it's released to manufacturer, and I'm using ESX 5.1, I am curious to see how this install goes. I have not rehearsed this. This is the very first attempt. Okay, that's gray. So it's insisting on us handling a license key. I'm going to grab one now. Okay, I should point out that data center key would not work, but standard key did work. So I'm going to go with standard server with GUI. Custom install, because there is no operating system. 750 gig, yep. Click next. And there we go. The files are being copied. Okay, we're resuming. Look at the install here. Upper, lower, letters and numbers, I believe, are enforced on that initial password. Okay, Controlled Insert sends Control Delete to the virtual machine console. So once we get the desktop here, naturally we're going to want to go ahead and install VMware Tools and see if that installation is uneventful and straightforward. Okay, Server Manager's running. Mouse is jumpy as can be expected. And if we hit Windows plus X, we get this key administrative pop-up to bring up Device Manager. So naturally, things like network adapters are not optimal yet, and display adapter. We're going to fix all that with good old VMware Tools. So on this very first boot, I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot. Right-click on the VM. Oops. Right-click on the VM and say Guest, Install VMware Tools. Quick look at the operating system size on disk. About 11.4 gig. Another thing I'll just point out is I like to show all these icons, especially during early install. And I also want to set the clock to the right time zone. And turn off auto syncing. I'd rather use VMware Tools to do that. You'll see that coming up here. Okay, so we got the clock right. VMware Tools. I think it did briefly pop up. I missed it, but could click on the installer there, or we could just double click the drive. Okay. VMware Tools installation underway. The version of VMware Tools you get is dictated by the bundled version that's in your version of ESXi 5.1. So this is my first test with ESXi 5.1 in what's expected to be the final build, RTM, coupled with Windows Server 2012, which is definitely the release to manufacture version. Okay, tools install next. Typical is fine. Next, install. Now, if you think you might move this virtual machine over to VMware Workstation somewhere else, you might want to do a full install for maximum compatibility and ability to move it all over the place. So my mouse will seamlessly move in and out of this virtual machine once the proper VMware branded mouse driver is installed.